Hey everyone, RobloxDev here, back with another one, where today we are going to learn about variables, integers, and string values. So let's get started with variables right here. So as you can see, I use the note feature that we learned in the last video. So let's get started with the variables. So to create a variable, you need to type local, and you can name your variable anything. So I'm going to call it my first variable, so var for short. Ignore this blue line here, and that's just because we haven't defined it yet. And so what is a variable? A variable is, say, it's like a value that holds something. So for example, the box's name is my first var. So if the box's name was fruit, right? Then you would probably guess that it holds like apples and stuff, right? So if the box's name was fruit, or local fruit, right? So this basically just means my variable is going to be called fruit, and the equal means fruit is going to have what in it? What are you going to put in it? So that's when this is where we learn about integers and strings. So let's get started with integers. So from last video we learned about the simple print, and you just put two quotation marks, and then you can type anything you want. And if we just ignore this line for a second, that is going to print out what we wrote, right? So what we can do is just put print with nothing there, and local fruit, right? So this is our variable. The variable is called fruit, and it can be equivalent to something. So let's go look at a string. A string is anything stored inside these lines. So my first string, like that, my first string. There it is. So if I were to type in fruit here, I think you can guess what it will do. It's gonna be like fruit. Well, over here we learned that fruit is equivalent to my first string. So what it does is it prints my first string. And the same thing applies for integers. Integers, however, they don't go in quotation marks, right? Integers, they go, simply like that. An integer, if you didn't know, is just a number value, right? Any number. So if we just type in any number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? What's going to happen here is it's going to print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you don't get it, I'll explain why it printed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's because we said fruit, don't worry about the local, that's just how you define your variable. We said fruit is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when we printed fruit, it already knew that fruit is equivalent to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it just printed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So instead of this, well, variables become really handy when you're referencing, which you will learn in the next video. But don't worry about that for now. So this is technically equivalent to going here and typing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh yeah, one more thing. As you can see, fruit has a blue underline, and that's because unknown global fruit. It doesn't know what fruit means, which is why we have to define it in a variable. If we do this, it's not going to work because it doesn't know what fruit is. If you did want it to print the word fruit, on the other hand, what you would do is you would add quotation marks before and after the word fruit, like that, because you want to print a string. If you don't put anything, right? If you don't put anything and you type in fruit, it's gonna look for a variable called fruit, and it's gonna ask itself, what do we know that's called fruit? But if you do add a string to it, it's gonna say, oh well, they want us to print fruit. I hope that does make sense. So now we are gonna look at something pretty interesting. It's called concatenation. So what is concatenation? You can actually join strings together. For example, if we had one variable here, let's say if you want to call it fruit, right? And you called it apple. Well, first of all, this would not work, and I'll tell you why. Because it doesn't know what apple is, right? I just put it there, completely blind. It doesn't know what apple means. But if I did want it to, if I want it to be called apple, like the word and not a variable, so here I'll explain here. Print fruit. It's gonna say, okay, fruit is equivalent to whatever is after this equal sign. But the problem here is it's gonna say nil, and nil basically just means nothing. because apple is not equivalent to anything. So what we would do in this case is put apple inside a string. As you can see, this is now a string. And now, fruit would simply just give us apple. And remember, the variable name can be anything. Like if I just wanted to call it like whatever this is, I'd copy it, paste it in here. And one more thing, as you can see, fruit is underlined. It doesn't know what fruit means anymore because I changed the variable name. But if I put that there, it would print apple. And that's because it asked itself, what does this mean? Well, it already knows what this means. It means apple, right? For integers, however, it works, you know, inside a string. You could put numbers in there. But what you could do also is just put them out there like that. And what that would give you is 1, 3, 2, 4. And that's because an integer does not have to go inside quotation marks. So if we just did local my variable equals let's see, we're gonna learn concatenation, so we're gonna call this my variable 1. So my variable 1, and remember, you can only concatenate strings together. You can't concatenate an integer to a string. Well, if you did want to do that, you would not put the integer first. I'll explain what I mean. So my first variable is, it's going to be called str short for string. Actually, we can just type with the first full version, string 1, and we can do local my variable 2 is equal to string 2. And so if we did print my variable 1, my variable 2, as you can see, there's a red underline because it doesn't know. See, it's just going to be like a bunch of these brackets and all of that. Another thing I used to do is try and like connect them with the comma. And that does work in printing. But things like on a, you know when it displays your coins? And it says your coins out of something, like your backpack number, say in a simulator. This is what they do. They take your the amount of coins you have, and then they take however much backpack storage you have, and then they put them together like this. For example, you would do dot dot my variable 2, and essentially what this does is it connects them together. So I'll explain what I mean. As you can see, string 1, string 2. And the reason there isn't a space is because it literally took string 1, right here, it took string 1, and what it did is it put it here, and then it saw, okay, we are concatenating, which is like joining together. So what it did is it said, okay, what are we concatenating? It's going to be my variable 2. My variable 2, we already know what it means. It means string 2. So it goes back, it gets string 2, puts it there. And if we did want to add a space, it's a pretty clever trick here. Not really a trick. Just put a space right there. And then what it does is it puts them together with the space. And say I wanted to connect them together with a dash. Put a dash there. And the same thing applies here. I just put a space there. Because what it does is it connects them together. As you can see, I got the same result. If I wanted to connect them with a dash, just be like that. There you go. And the same thing would happen if I got rid of it there and put it here. That's because what it did is it connected this to this. Right, so if I were just to test this one out, you can see it connected them together with a dash. And the next thing we are going to look at is how do integers come into play here? Well, if you were to create local number, right, another variable, I'm just going to call it number, let's just call it 1, dot dot 1, not sure what this would do, let's check it out. It does actually connect 1. That's because it's its own string, right, without quotation marks, it's its own string. You can connect strings like this, by the way. Let's actually take a look at that one. So if I were to get rid of all my variables, right, and if I just wanted to print, I put them in quotation marks because it's a string. So I put string 1, dot dot, string 2, and what happens is it connects a string together. Both strings connected, right? And if I just put a space here, it would connect them together, and it would actually look at that space. Something else we're going to look at is how to add like extra lines. Also, row defender, guys, it's something useful to have. Will link it in the description. So how to create different lines. So for example, I will quickly demonstrate. Right, so in here I'll just do, and we'll leave that blank to explain. So essentially what this does is it creates multiple lines. It looks at this whole gap, right? So even if I wanted to put something up here, and over here if I wanted to, over here if I wanted to do that, what it would do, as you can see, it's like this says print, and then as you can see, print, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's a space, it took the space into account, and then it put whatever this is down there as well. So essentially what this does is, I've never really used it, it's just something I think you should know because it's pretty basic. I've never really used it. You can just make lines in your printing, and that's all it's for. So I think we have covered everything pretty well here. Obviously, let's actually take a quick look at concatenating integer values. So just local number 1 equals 1, local number 2 is equal to 2, and we could just type in print, print number 1 dot dot number 2. And what this does is it joins them together, right? You could also just type 2 here, type 1 there, and it would not work. And it's a malformed number. So what it's trying to say, if you remember from last video, you never start, or not last video, but this is actually something very important to know. Never start your variables with a number. Just a ground rule that I'm going to include in notes. Never start a variable with a number. And that's just something related to concatenation, right? It just won't concatenate properly. It throws errors. Don't start your variables with numbers. You can get around it very easily. Anyways, I hope you learned something today. This is episode 2 in the Beginner to Advanced Scripting series. And I have fixed my right-click menus. As you can see, you can now see this. And if there was a part and I wanted to change color, you can see this menu now. You can see this menu now. And that's all. Hopefully you learned something useful today. And I will see you guys in episode 3 of Beginner to Advanced Scripting.